We want to help you be the very best missionary so that you can give your very best to the people you're serving. What makes this podcast unique is it's done by missionaries for missionaries. How can we take timeless principles and apply them to our lives as missionaries? That's really our heart behind this. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Modern Day Missionaries. Our guest for today is Pastor Robert Barriger, and you're going to notice that I'm calling him Pastor Robert throughout our conversation because he holds a very special place in my family's heart. He is our pastor, who we've served under for a decade in Peru, and there is no pastor that I personally respect more. He's a spiritual father to my husband, Danny, and to me, and he and his incredible wife, Pastor Karen, have served in Peru for nearly 40 years. Is that right? Nearly 40 years?
39 years. We're heading to 40. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And Camino de Vida has been in existence for how many years now?
I think we're going on 34.
34 years.
Yeah, 34.
And that's the church that they planted in Lima, Peru. It's around 14,000 members thanks to the pandemic. Things have grown. I mean, it's a congregation that's really become worldwide. It's so beyond just Peru. I mean, would you have ever dreamed, Pastor Robert, that Camino de Vida would be considered church home by people not only in Peru, but in other countries and even other continents?
Crazy world today. The opportunities for the gospel, for sharing, spreading the gospel is more than ever before. And apparently we have what people are searching for, and they're connecting with us through our online services just about everywhere. So for us, online is here to stay. We're going to continue to minister through that channel because people can be involved in small groups. They can serve on online platforms and be very active in church. So, yeah, we're doing it, trying to
It
get it
is.
going.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And one of the things I love about you, Pastor Robert, is that you are a pastor of pastors. Your heart has been since day one to serve the local church and to equip pastors in Latin America specifically, but really Spanish-speaking pastors all over. And I would love watching you connect pastors with other pastors, which is so valuable, even across continents and across languages. And anyone that who I meet who knows you says the same thing when I tell them that you are my pastor. They say, he is so wise and faithful and humble and full of honor. Those would be the four things that I hear consistently. And I can really say after a decade of serving with you, I feel the exact same way. You're one of those quiet giants in the faith that's really changing the world for Jesus in the enormous ways. So I am so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Good to be on the podcast. Here we go.
Here we go. Here we go. And I'm excited about what we're talking about today because the number one response that we heard back from modern day missionaries when we surveyed them about what they'd like to hear about was really about having a vibrant relationship with Jesus on the field. This is something I've seen you and Pastor Karen cultivate so faithfully during your years in Peru. Pastor, what has that journey of keeping your relationship with Jesus alive looked like for you in your almost 40 years on the field?
Today, modern day, uh, when we're doing this podcast, it's easier than ever to stay connected. And I think that is one of the key points. When we came here 40 years ago, they didn't have internet, didn't have ATM cards. Um, and because of that, a phone call to the United States was very expensive, and living on a limited budget. Um, the we were depending on mail coming in with a check in the mail instead of a deposit and being able to transfer or wire transfer to an account. So it's gotten a lot easier. And part of that is it can be lonely if you're not connected.
Yeah.
You can feel alone. You're in another country And it's interesting because you're there, you're ministering to people, but there we have that other side of us. And the other side of us is we have the best of two cultures, uh, one where we live and the one where we came from. And we just need that friendship, that not to be alone, where it says it's not good for a man to be alone. I really believe it's not good for missionaries to be alone. We need to have people around us.
And I love that you brought that up because I think sometimes when people think about a relationship with God, their first default is to go to their individual relationship with God, which is obviously very important. And we can talk more about that as we go into it. But you started first with community, and community is huge. We cannot have a vibrant relationship with God if we are isolated and on our own.
We need friends. We need a circle of friends around us uh,
Yeah.
on the spiritual side to know they're praying for us and they've got our back. They're actually going to be supporting missionaries. It's not an easy time uh, with the missionary support. Um, but we just need people that we can encourage in the Lord. They can encourage us, um, especially coming out of this pandemic time, uh,
Yeah.
especially.
And how have you found those kinds of people? Talking to a lot of missionaries who are lonely, like you mentioned, how have you found people who have energized your relationship with God?
Oh gosh, there's a saying that I heard and I've adopted. It takes a long time to make old friends, and you just need some old friends, some people that have been around since you started. It just takes a long time. So hold on to those old friends. Once again, 40 years ago, the way we held on was snail mail. We would sit down, write a letter longhand and send it. And 3 weeks later, they might get it. And 6 weeks later, we might get an answer. Um, and then email came in and it made things easy. And now we have all kinds of avenues to stay connected with FaceTime and WhatsApp and Zoom. And we can stay connected now more than ever. Use it. Use it. And it's not always staying connected with other missionaries. It's staying connected with the people that are your friends. Sometimes they will be missionaries. Sometimes in the mission field, it's the people you're working with on the field won't be the closest to you. And it's just a harsh reality of being a missionary.
And it's interesting that you brought that up too about all of the opportunities and the way we can stay connected. Sometimes I will talk to people, I've even felt this myself, where you can have so many relationships, almost more than you can keep up with, and yet there isn't depth within that. How have you cultivated deep relationships without getting lost in the noise of so many?
Well, the many is what we do. We minister to many, but we get
Mhm.
close to few. Um, it's just you're not going to have a deep relationship. I love to watch people's social media posts where they say my good friend," and they mention a pastor, and it's good to have friends. I mean, I've got lots of good friends, but there's an inner circle of people that I'm close to, and those are the pastors that are on my board, the pastors that I'm accountable to, and they're the ones that I can actually, just say, "Hey, it's been a little bit of a rough season. Um, can you pray with me, or can we pray together?" Or sometimes they'll call me and say, "It's been a rough season for us. You know, just give us some of your heart, some of your ideas." So you need those friends, and you're not going to have that is not a lot of people. I'm talking about
Yeah.
a handful, you know.
Yeah.
And if you don't have them, develop them. And you go through 2 or 3 or 4 until you find one that sticks. So,
I love that about just keep trying and keep looking. Sometimes you find what you think is the perfect person who's going to make a great friend, but maybe their friend card is full and they don't have capacity. So it's pushing through rejection to keep looking.
No, and you've gotta be available to be hurt,
Mm,
because if you go with a good friend that you think, "Hey, I think I can really get along with this guy," and then they move into something else or drop you real quick or send a harsh note, and it was like, "Oh, okay, that one didn't work." Um, but over the years, we've been here 40 years, we've developed a good circle of close friends
mm.
and a larger circle of friends and even a larger circle of people that we can influence that we call friends.
Yeah, that's so good.
Mhm.
And so that's on the kind of the community friend side. On the individual side, what are things that you've done to keep yourself stirred up? Maybe when you felt dry or disconnected from God?
You know, you sent this question a little bit ahead, and I've actually been meditating on it.
Yeah.
And I know in the early years of being a missionary, that was probably more of a deal with us because we're constantly in that double two worlds, the culture we're in, the culture we're from. Um, and I remember even reading some early mission books, Through Gates of Splendor. One of the five missionaries that was killed was actually considering quitting because he felt discouraged before he went in to try to reach this tribe and was killed in the tribe. And his life was used to literally inspire thousands. He had no clue he was going to be that inspirational, but he was discouraged at, you know, days before that happened. And it just happens. It's the way the enemy works, discouragement. Um, we can call it PTSD. Uh, I've been going through some books in history. They used to call it shell shocked or soldier's fatigue.
Yeah.
So I said all that. It's real important the relationship at home, strong marriage, keep the friendship close with your family. Um, you will build some friends where the place where you're ministering. Some of them will be deep friends. Um, and I can't take this away from community because none of us are an island. We need people that will be around us.
Absolutely. What is an essential spiritual practice that is critical to you in staying connected with the Lord?
Oh gosh, spiritual practice. Discipline is probably the best word. And the way I would discipline myself is, there's a nature to want to kind of take the easy road.
Hmm.
So when I was or when I am offered to take a class or to minister someplace, my answer was always yes. Because if I'm teaching a class, like I did this in the early years when I had more time to teach in Bible schools, I actually taught in different Bible schools here in Peru, not only ours, but others. And that was a discipline because I had to stay fresh for each class.
Mm.
And that discipline actually helped me. It deposits things deep inside that in the future you pull out. You you studied just for a class, but it was more than a class. So
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 by
yeah.
Yeah, so by committing yourself to teaching those classes, to feeding other people, it necessitated that you were feeding yourself and studying.
Yeah, because the natural course is we're gonna look for a little vacation, a little rest, and
Mm.
you get those. You have to time schedule those in, but take the discipline to add some more things to your list. Take a small group, teach a class, find some churches that you can teach and fellowship with. In the early days, there was a group of pastors here in Peru. We called them FIPAC. Your father-in-law was a part of it, but
Yeah.
I went not because I had time. It was a spiritual discipline to hang with a group of pastors in the city. And that actually ended up being a blessing to thousands of pastors, that little group of pastors.
Yeah. You know what else is coming to mind as you're talking about this is the devotional that you started in the pandemic for
Mm.
our staff originally and the way that that grew.
Yeah. Well, I did it because when the pandemic hit, like everybody, everybody scattered. All of a sudden, we went from full Sunday celebrations uh, in Camino de Vida, church everywhere, lots happening, to overnight, no church on Sunday. And my thing as a pastor was, how do we keep people connected?
Mhm.
And I realized, well, they need to keep hearing my voice. So I started with a devotion that's evolved. Um, and now it's become a over 2 year devotion. And it probably won't stop. It just keeps people connected. A little 3 to 4 minute devotion I send out by WhatsApp, and then it's resent and resent and resent. And it gets it just has a life of its own today. But yeah, we've been doing that faithfully, not missing a day for almost 900 days as we're doing this podcast.
Oh my gosh. Yes, this morning's on Hebrews 12:1. It was so good. And how has doing that devotional for the staff or whoever is listening, obviously a lot more than that, impacted you personally in your walk with the Lord?
It just keeps me fresh. I'm constantly, when I read, I'm looking for verses that I could share in a devotion.
And I love that you use the word fresh as you were talking about your process, because I think that that's what a lot of people are looking for. They feel dry. Sometimes they are producing so much for others that they're not really considering the impact of what it has on them. And so you have found a way to create things for other people, but also still absorb it at the same time and let it minister to you.
Yeah, I think it's what a missionary does. And it really should be what a pastor does, or anybody, any Christian does, is don't live for you, live for others.
Yeah.
And what I've found is we give to others, God keeps our cup full.
Hmm.
Um, I can honestly say I've been a missionary now almost 40 years, over 39, been serving the Lord almost 50 years as a Christian. And I don't think, I mean, I've had dips of depression or dips of, where I haven't felt the Lord that close, but I've never had a moment where I've walked away. Uh, we've kept this walk now solid for 50 years, and I'm not stopping now. And it's really when you live for others, focusing on helping others, then God keeps your cup.
Yeah. And you are such a consistent person. One of my favorite things that you talk about is plotting.
Yeah. William Carey said it, and it's actually become one of my filters. Um, but I guess William Carey, when he went to be a missionary, and he's considered one of the uh, founders of modern day missions, not modern day as the organization, but
Right.
modern missions. Uh, and one of the things he said when he said, I want to go to the mission field, the church came back to him and said, what do you think you can do? In other words, it tells me he was probably maybe awkward, which a lot of missionaries are, maybe a little introverted. Um, and they were thinking, like, what can you do? And his answer was, I can plot. And in that plotting, he won millions to the Lord. But he went 20 years without seeing one convert, and then won many converts. So I think if, I've heard it said this way, it's faithfulness is long-term obedience in one direction.
Mm.
And if we can just be obedient in one direction, not 10 directions, not trying something new every year, but just stay stuck on something, um, then eventually it'll bless some people and you'll see the
Beautiful.
fruit grow.
I believe that's Eugene Peterson has his book, A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. And you brought up words today, Pastor Robert, that I don't know that everybody thinks of when they think of revitalizing the relationship with the Lord. You brought up consistency, plotting, discipline, faithfulness, long term, words that we don't often think of as exciting words. And yet, when you do them consistently, they produce some pretty exciting results.
Yeah, I think what I say about missions is long-term missions is long-term results. And there's a lot of short-term missionaries, people that come for 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, a year, couple years. And what they're getting is a deposit in their life about uh, world Christians, Christians that think beyond America. I often say if you never travel out of the United States, you have tunnel vision. So there, get out of that tunnel vision. But there will be a few that are called just to long-term missions, long-term results. Stay in one place and give your life. One of the things Karen and I said when we came to Peru, we visited Peru the first time in 1978. And our prayer when we felt that this was the nation that we wanted to serve God in, if God would open that door, what we said was, God will give our lives to this nation. And that's what that means. It's long term.
Mm-hmm.
And we determined in the beginning, this is long term. So
And that's what you have done, and it has blessed so many people. And I'm just so thankful that you could be here with us today, Pastor, just sharing some of your wisdom, sharing some of those principles that have really helped you do this long term and stay energized in your faith. There is so much I wish that we could talk about. There's a million other directions we could even go in. But for those of you who want to connect with Pastor Robert and learn more, if you are a Spanish speaker, please pick up his book, Iglesia Relevante, to hear the history of Camino de Vida. He also has books, Abuelos and Filtros. And he has a podcast, Haciendo Iglesia, that is espectacular. If you speak Spanish. For all of you English speakers, grab a copy of his book, Honor Found, to hear his heart on honor, which is outstanding. It's the essence of who he is. And you can also find him on Instagram at Robert Barriger or at Camino de Vida, or on the web at caminodevida.com// life missions to see more in English. And we'll be posting more of the resources mentioned today at modernday.org. Do not forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, as well as share the podcast with somebody you know who would love it, and continue to send us your questions at care@modernday.org. Thank you again for listening, Pastor Robert. Thank you again so much for joining us.
joy to be here. Good to see you again.
Yes, we will see you on the next episode.